Much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to start today's debate, and in particular my contribution to this year's budget debate, by thanking the constituents of Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, thanking them for the opportunity and the privilege, because I do view it as a privilege, to serve not only the constituency, but also my country, our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago, for the last 8 years. It dawned on me, Madam Speaker, as I was reflecting over the weekend, in preparation for today's proceedings and what is sure to follow in the coming days, that this is the 9th annual budget debate that I'm contributing to. And I use the opportunity as I reflect with the 40 other members of this House, all of us elected members, to put a question to all of us. Do we believe in Trinidad and Tobago, or do we not believe in Trinidad and Tobago? Madam Speaker, I can say that without fear of contradiction. Not only do I believe in Trinidad and Tobago, but I will always bat for Trinidad and Tobago and do my utmost best as I serve Trinidad and Tobago in whatever capacity. Because you see, Madam Speaker, I believe that we are blessed land. I believe as well that despite what we hear, and it is quite unfortunate within recent times, because I've observed that some of our very own citizens, and that is what hurts. It is not the outsiders, it is not the international commentators, it is not the expert rating agencies whose duty and job it is to rate us, but it is our very own citizens sometimes, and within recent times, who degrade our beloved country and unfortunately cry us down. So, Madam Speaker, I would like to use my contribution to set out the indisputable facts of Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector. Because you see, Madam Speaker, respectfully, there are few of us, a handful, but they're very loud, raucous, misinformed, but unfortunately as well, I've observed it is their intentional strategy to mislead the population of Trinidad and Tobago and to mislead our citizens. So, Madam Speaker, respectfully, today my contribution must be to set out what has been happening in our hydrocarbon sector, our energy sector, our oil and gas sector, which has served us so well for many, many years. And I'd like to start, Madam Speaker, by just putting things into context, because it appears to me that some persons don't understand, or maybe some just choose to misinform themselves, and worse yet, to try to mislead the population about how production works, the stage that we're at as a province, meaning Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, we are a mature province. We have mature oil and gas fields. We have been exploiting oil, one of the first in the Western Hemisphere to commercialize, and I repeat it once again, making history as far back as over a century ago. Trinidad and Tobago has been exploiting our oil, which means the drilling and production of oil, selling it, commercializing it, monetizing it for well over 100 years. Thankfully, a PNM government that came before us in the 1970s, as they took charge of our country and charted our progress, saw it fit to develop a gas industry. And we have a sophisticated gas industry. And it's an opportune moment for us to thank our forefathers, those who came before, those who made the decisions, and most noteworthy, the PNM people who made the decision to develop what was developed at Point Lisas, fertilizer plants, a petrochemical industry, and later on, an LNG industry. And I have great pride in that. So almost 50 years of commercial gas production, Madam Speaker. And this ultimately means a few things. As you exploit these resources, they are not renewable. These resources, when exploited, basically don't return. So it means after 100 years of oil drilling and production, and after over 50 years of commercial gas production, our fields are in natural decline. This is the reality. This is one of the main reasons for lower production, but it doesn't stop there, as I will explain. our field's natural decline, and this is indisputable despite what you may hear from those who hold themselves out as experts, our field's natural decline are between 20 to 25% per annum. So that means that if you do nothing and you're producing 100 barrels of oil, for example, from one field, by the end of the year, you will only be producing 80 to 75 barrels. So you must find a way to not only increase your production by that 20 to 25 barrels, but if you really want to increase it more than what has become your average, you have to find more oil or more gas to uplift it. Another point that it is necessary to make, Madam Speaker, because you see the hypocrisy that I hear at times and the irony of some who hold themselves out as somehow experts on production. You have to negotiate contracts well in advance. You have to look into the future and see that there's going to be a decline. You can't do something today in most circumstances in oil and gas and bring on production immediately. So what you do is you look at a period when someone is in charge and see what is it that they did to ensure not only a stabilization of production to arrest that natural decline I've spoken about, but also to increase the production. And that is where you begin to negotiate contracts. That is where you begin to have discussions with persons because you know there's a horizon. You know a gas contract is going to come to an end. What is it that you do to do that? So let's just put some facts on the table because it seems very often people try to avoid the reality. Gas. I'll start with gas, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in 2006, we were producing 3.8 BCF of gas a day, 3.8 billion cubic standard feet of gas a day. 2007, 2008, we went up to 4. 2009, 4.2. Now, all of that production would have been as a result of decisions taken in advance, at least 2, 3, 4, 5 years in advance. So up to 2009, we were at 4.2. Our best year ever in gas production was 2010 at 4.3 BCF a day. In 2011 and 2013, it reduced to 4.1. So you see the decline beginning from 2011 to 2013. But most importantly, because you see nothing was done, in 2014, it dropped to 4 BCF. In 2015, it had already dropped to 3.8 BCF a day. So when you're seeing this decline taking place, the natural question that citizens should ask is what was done? What was done to increase production? What was done to arrest the natural decline? And the answer quite simply is absolutely nothing. In fact, what we've heard about is incentives granted during the period 2010 to 2015, and I'll come to that in a while. But it's an important point to put down two markers. It is an indisputable fact, indisputable, that not a single gas supply contract, upstream gas supply contract was negotiated in that period of 2010 to 2015. In fact, the incentive that you hear so often spoken by someone who says he's a former Minister of Energy, which is too indisputable, but one who, along with his leader, the Honourable Member for Siparia, respectfully did nothing to promote and to progress the oil and gas sector during that period. And I will give the examples. Did not negotiate a single gas supply contract during that period. Not a single upstream gas supply. In fact, when questioned, we were told, oh, it is maintenance. But the decline had begun. And I will then say what was done from 2015 to date to not only arrest this decline that we were faced with and the crisis we were faced with, but how, in fact, you ensure the future and the future for decades to come. Oil production now, Madam Speaker. 2008, it was 114,000 barrels of oil a day. By 2010, it had fallen to 98,000 barrels of oil a day. By 2012, it had fallen to 81,000.6 barrels of oil a day. By 2015, it had fallen to 78,000 barrels of oil a day. So you see, from 2008 at 114,000, it dropped by 2015 to 78,000 barrels of oil per day. But this is something you never hear about. One of the explanations, of course, is because we have been exploiting oil for over 100 years, over 100 years, a century. I said a decade earlier, I think it's a century. And this leads to natural decline. But it shows that under the former administration, oil production fell from 100,000 barrels to 78,000 barrels of oil per day. But we hear nothing about that. They pretend as though it was hunky-dory. Today, oil production stands at approximately 59,000 barrels of oil per day because of the natural decline of our aged fields. But as I will explain, we have been working, we have been doing all that we possibly can. And save that you find a massive oil field, the likes of what have been found in neighboring Guyana and hopefully in Suriname, because I'm hopeful for our neighbors. But I'll give you a quick story about Guyana as well. In Guyana, one of the main operators, for example, was Shell. For many years, they actually held that acreage, where now Exxon has found hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day they're able to exploit. Shell gave it up because they could not find what they were looking for. Along comes Exxon, fortunately for them, good production. But that is how the oil and gas sector goes. But the point is, we are facing natural decline. The point is, don't come and pontificate because you did nothing to increase it during your time or to ensure the future. In fact, you did the exact opposite, Madam Speaker. So to do it in the energy sector, you must always be pursuing initiatives to bring on production, always negotiating, always strategically pursuing possibilities, which is what, again, no one can contradict, we have been doing since 2015. Because you see, Madam Speaker, this PNM government that did not put all of its eggs, Trinidad and Tobago's eggs, in one basket. We did not only focus internally in our own borders. We have been pursuing every single basket that is possible. Regionally, extra-regionally, we've been looking to Venezuela next door, and we've been looking elsewhere in the region. We've signed MOUs with Barbados, with Grenada. We actually have a commercial term sheet in Grenada for a field where gas is believed to exist. These are things that we have been doing to ensure that there's a future for children. Excuse me. Madam Speaker, another point I've heard being referred to, which I find is just confirmatory, with the greatest of respect, that there's a complete lack of understanding of how the energy sector works and the cyclical nature of the energy sector. When you're building plants, onshore plants, or petchem factories, which are the ammonia, methanol, urea, UAN, or Atlantic LNG with the 4 trains, obviously there's going to be a flurry of activity. The time for construction of infrastructure means you have support companies like Baker Hughes, Schlumberger, not Schlumberger as I heard the member for Siparia say, Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker Hughes. These are the companies that construct infrastructure, construct the pipelines. Where Trinidad and Tobago is in the cycle now is we have completed construction. You look globally, there is no more pursuit the way it was once pursued globally in the early 2000s and the 2000s in the construction of these types of plants. One, because of the whole talk of global climate change, but two, because of the closing horizons of oil production and gas production as countries try to arrest global climate change. So it is absolutely not unnatural. In fact, it is expected because we are sophisticated. We've already constructed the infrastructure to exist and we're utilizing it amongst the best in the world for these service companies to look elsewhere now, to hope that they will find the opportunities and the abilities to build what already exists in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is the reason for this. As we start the projects, as Manatee comes on stream, as Dragon comes on stream, as these other projects come on stream, Calypso, which holds great, great opportunity and hope for Trinidad and Tobago in the deep water where there is no infrastructure. You will see the return of the companies, but they're not going to sit here where you already have existing infrastructure. Madam Speaker, the next point is, what did we face in 2015? In 2015, when we came in, as I just said, there was no negotiation of a single gas supply contract. The sector, as you've heard me say before, was in crisis. And let me tell you what NGC, I'll start with the gas industry, what NGC faced. Between 2010 to 2015, Madam Speaker, NGC did not receive its contracted supply of gas from upstream suppliers. And as a result, it was forced to curtail supply to downstream customers. So what we're seeing began in 2010 to 15. But what didn't happen was any attempt to have discussions with the petchem, the industries that were receiving a shortfall of gas. There was no attempt to renegotiate contracts. There was no attempt to starve off claims being made. No, it was business as usual, utilizing NGC to build playing fields, etc., etc. $14 billion disappeared from NGC's coffers during that period. And what we faced is when these curtailments started in November 2010 and peaked in 2014 to 2015, was claims being made against NGC for failure to supply during that period. This is indisputable. Claims were made, have been made against NGC for the failure to supply gas during the period of 2010 to 2015. Total value of those claims, $1.3 billion US dollars, which equates to 8.85 billion TT dollars. That was the management of the industry. I can assure the people of Trinidad and Tobago, one of the ways this government, have addressed that is we have, in the renegotiation of contracts with all of these petchem industries and companies, what we have now done in the new contracts going forward is they cannot pass on curtailments of gas to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So the people of Trinidad and Tobago are no longer going to be subject to damages if there's a shortfall of gas. Did the UNC do that? No. So they've saddled us with $8.8 billion in claims. Not only did this PNM government successfully negotiate now, I can say, negotiate all of these claims away for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but we have also ensured that contracts going forward do not put that liability on us anymore. Because you see, despite what some others were doing, which is questionable, this government has stayed focused, and we've entered into difficult conversations and negotiations, not only with the upstream industry, but also with the downstream petchem companies, petroleum companies. But let me tell you how it was worse. The upstream supply situation could have been seen during that period that it was on the decline. And there were certain contracts that had actually renewal, options to renew, that were ignored. The people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve to know this, because you see, Madam Speaker, you have them going on television, you have them coming in the parliament, you have them coming everywhere. Persons who know nothing but pretend that they do, holding out as though they have the answers. But when you were in charge, and I will draw the worst, the most offensive that I found, there was a contract with our largest upstream gas supplier that was due to expire in December 2018. But under that gas supply contract, Madam Speaker, there was a contractual timeline that between the 1st of January 2014, from that period, for 2 years, so from the 1st of January 2014, you had 2 years to meet and negotiate an extension of the gas supply contract. They did not do it. But yet still you hear them on a weekly basis asking the country about gas production. The UNC failed to negotiate gas supply contracts for Trinidad and Tobago, where the contract required them to meet and negotiate from January 2014. But they have the audacity to ask Trinidad and Tobago why we're in this position. That was one of them. That was the single largest gas supply contract. That was how they managed the industry. That is a fact. It is indisputable. It is not subject to legitimate and truthful contradiction. There were others. A base gas supply contract that was not renewed upon expiry on the 31st of December 2015, which again, they're allowed to just fall off the precipice because you don't begin negotiating a gas supply contract today for today. We lost 250 million scuffs of gas. So these are the reasons why we faced the production decline and the curtailments. There was another one that again was expiring in early 2016 that should have been negotiated before, that dropped from 645 million scuffs to 255 million. So right there, Madam Speaker, you are seeing why it is we found ourselves in these great difficulties. But we did not sit back, we did not rock back, we did not say, well, look, this is something that we cannot manage. No, we set about immediately, Madam Speaker, to do what needed to be done. But it didn't stop there. There was another one that should have been negotiated during that period that they ignored. That meant we went from 150 million scuffs of gas a day to 50. So right there, you're almost up to a loss of over 1.2 BCF of gas a day that should have been renegotiated. I can't claw back time. No one on the PNM can claw back history and time. But what we do is we face the crisis and deal with it. And it continued. There was another one that we went from 220 million scuffs to 30 million to 0. Because again, no negotiation was done during that period. But the persons in charge who should have been managing our country's resources and ensuring that contracts are negotiated, where were they? But now they come forward to the population and pretend as though they understand the energy sector. Madam Speaker, these are facts. There is no alternative to the truth. There was one contract that was negotiated, one new plant that was negotiated. But of course, it was negotiated at a time when we were seeing curtailment of gas. So if you know that you have less gas to sell to the existing plants, you will go now and put priority on a new plant to give it gas, as opposed to those who have been here for us for decades. So that led to us losing claims. We lost claims as a result of that one contract that was negotiated during that period. And that contract has cost NGC billions of dollars. In fact, the only loss ever recorded by NGC is as a direct result of accounting standards that require it to impair and write off the losses of that contract. And I am told that the losses continue as a result of that one contract that was negotiated. You know what I find also offensive, Madam Speaker? These same people call for, tell me what is happening with Dragon. Tell us what is the agreement signed with Dragon. Tell us this, tell us that. But they did not tell the country that they changed the gas allocation policy to a greenfield gas allocation policy, which exposed us to billions of US dollars in claims, because what that means is you're taking the limited gas we have and you're giving it to a new plant versus the plants who are already contracted to receive gas supply. You didn't tell us that. You didn't tell us about this one contract that you negotiated that is literally still costing you and me, Madam Speaker, and the future generations billions of dollars. But that was how you managed it. That is what you should talk about and answer. So that project has cost us greatly and deeply and continues to cost us. As I said, it led to the only loss NGC has ever made in its 2020 annual report, because we had to provision 2.1 billion TT dollars as the losses to book in that year as a result of this one contract that you did. And it had worse terms that fortunately we managed to negotiate and renegotiate. But you can't renegotiate the whole thing when it was brand new. The next thing that came is the settlement of petchem claims. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, due to the intervention of the government, the last one was with a company that the president of NGC and myself met with in Vancouver when I went to speak at the World LNG Conference a few months ago. And they reported coming out of that meeting, because of the sense of assurance they got from the highest levels of the government, that they will continue in Trinidad and Tobago, and they settled the last outstanding claim. So I can say today without fear of contradiction that we have saved Trinidad and Tobago US $1.1 billion, $7.5 billion by our negotiation of claims. So when I hear those on the other side and some from the other house ask, tell us about it, I'm telling you about it now. You left us with $8.8 billion in claims. We saved in our negotiations $1.3 billion US, $7.5 billion US. So you all still cost the country $1 billion in claims. But a PNM government negotiated that. And I can say as well, negotiated that without expensive lawyers and friends here, there. Negotiated with NGC and with the government, supporting NGC and doing what we did. Contrary to what you heard about the management and the lack of negotiation of gas contracts, I can also report to the country, madams, during the period 2010 to 2015, not a single, let it resound in this chamber, through you, Madam Speaker, to the people outside, not a single gas supply contract negotiated. We heard about renewals that had come up that should have been negotiated, nothing done. So right there, in a lack of negotiation and foresight of the industry during that period, we lost over 1.5 BCF of gas in contracts immediately. Contrary to that, what I can report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, again, without fear of contradiction, from 2016 to date, we have negotiated. From 2017 to date, we have negotiated 31 upstream contracts and 115 downstream contracts for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So 0-0 from 2010 to 2015 versus 31 upstream contracts and 115 downstream contracts. That is how we have been managing your resources in the gas industry. We have also ensured that in all of the NGC contracts going forward, we have mitigated against the contractual risk. Because we learned from the past and we learned from what the people unfortunately have to face. So they do not now face the liability if there are reductions in gas. They have no bills to pay as a result of that. And I will prove to the country that we managed to renegotiate in the most difficult of areas, in the LNG area, better terms for Trinidad and Tobago. We have also entered into, this is NGC, innovative arrangements, where we have signed EPC contracts. We have signed, and we have actually sold, and I'm proud of this one, we have sold LNG as a country. NGC has sold LNG as a country. We've sent 20 third-party cargoes to Egypt. We have sold other LNG. We have also entered into arrangements where we now get methanol cargoes. And I can tell the country, as I will come to in a short while, that with respect to our renegotiation of the LNG sector, we have also managed to get an increased shareholding at no cost to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So you see, that is how we govern PNM style in the energy sector. We don't run up claims. We don't burn money. We do the exact opposite. The decisions we take, the contracts we negotiate, resound for the betterment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I say that again without fear of contradiction, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in early 2016, we found the gas master plan that was actually commissioned during the period 2014 to 2015, but hidden. So we found this gas master plan that talked about the leakage, meaning that we weren't getting sufficient revenue for our gas resources. What did we do? We sat and we strategized how best to deal with this, and we came up with the spotlight on energy that again will go down in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. We went to the spotlight on energy and we took on the large multinationals. At the time, they were screaming and shouting that we were going to run investors from Trinidad and Tobago. But you see, that is not how we do business. The reason for the travel of the Prime Minister and myself over all of those years is to go and establish relationships with the decision makers. Because you see, the decision makers at BP and Shell are in London and they're in The Hague. In EOG, they're in Houston. In BHP, they were in Australia. Now Woodside, they're in Australia. These are the major upstream suppliers in Trinidad. So we go to them and meet with them so they know what we're doing for Trinidad and Tobago. And we took on the restructuring of Atlantic LNG. But one of the things we found, you hear them talk about, you need to have initiatives to increase gas production in Trinidad and Tobago. Let me tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago what happened with the initiatives that were put in place during that period of time of 2010 to 2015. Our largest gas supplier, who was exploiting at the time almost 2 BCF of gas a day, told us that based on what the UNC did, we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, will not receive any revenue for our gas till 2024. So all of our gas being exploited, we would receive no revenue to 2024, which, by the way, has not even come. So for all of these years, we would receive nothing. What did your PNM government, and I am proud, Madam Speaker, to have been given and privileged to have been given the opportunity to lead the negotiations. And what we managed to do has resulted to Trinidad and Tobago, as a result of our restructuring and our negotiation of new gas prices and new royalty regimes. I can report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that from 2017 to 2023, whereas we were going to get not a drop of revenue due to what we negotiated, so it means we would not have gotten it, we have received to date $9.1 billion. So your initiatives led to no revenue, but as a direct result of the negotiation, and I'm proud I was given the opportunity to negotiate on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, my beloved country. In that instance, we got $9.1 billion. But it didn't end there, Madam Speaker. Also, as a result of those difficult, complex negotiations, I can tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we concluded some difficult negotiations with another one of our large gas suppliers that led to an initial payment of US $265 million in 2019. And to date, as a result of the new formula that we've negotiated for the value of our gas, a new formula which is a basket of indices, and that is how we manage it on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. From 2019 to date, we have received $6 billion that we would not have received. So you see, Madam Speaker, when I hear them question about the management of the sector, we on this side can say without fear of contradiction that as a direct result of our intervention at the highest level, from the Office of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Energy, and with our technocrats, and with the NGC, we have managed to get for the people of Trinidad and Tobago almost $16 billion that they would not have received due to what was done before. And that cannot be rewritten. It is a fact. We are renegotiating the restructuring of Atlantic LNG, Madam Speaker, which is again something that has never taken place in any jurisdiction in the world, and that is something we will come to the people hopefully within the next month. We intend to sign the final agreements. Thousands of pages are now being reviewed for restructured Atlantic LNG, that will mean better shareholding for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We also managed to negotiate third-party access to gas. So that means that not only NGC, Shell, and BP can bring gas to Atlantic LNG in the future, but others can as well. And it was our vision to fight for that, which now opens the opportunities for deep water with Woodside. It opens the opportunities for regional gas. It opens the opportunities for cross-border gas, because that did not exist before, and it would not have happened if it were not for this PNM government during the period 2015 to now. And that is what we are doing for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So better shareholding, third-party access of gas, better pricing for our gas, and therefore we ensure a future. And these negotiations lead to investments in projects like Dragon, in Manatee, in Calypso, in deep water, and also regional. The downstream relationships with our petroleum chemical industry, the ammonia, methanol, Trinidad and Tobago, and again I stand there without fear of contradiction. Those decisions taken by PNM governments of the past, Trinidad and Tobago, as at the last statistics that are readily available, which are 2021, Trinidad and Tobago is the second largest exporter of ammonia in the world, just after Russia. And in methanol, we are the second largest exporter of methanol in the world, just after Saudi Arabia. Again, something to be proud of. And we have managed the relationships with Nutrien, Methanex, Proman, Yara, Tringen. In fact, just last week in meeting with the executives of one of them that flew down to meet, they were happy to tell me that based on what they see us doing and they see the initiatives that this government is taking in upstream, next year they will invest $150 million in their plants in Trinidad and Tobago. These are global companies that don't have to invest here anymore, but they are saying, and they said it to me frontally, based on the government's initiatives and what we see happening in the energy sector, we have taken the decision to invest $150 million in Trinidad and Tobago next year to upgrade our plants. They wouldn't be doing that if they didn't see a future. Madam Speaker, equally on the upstream side, if you would permit me to just refer to the work that we have done, again, indisputable, not subject to contradiction, contrary to what you heard of the management or the lack of management in 10 to 15, from 2016, September 2015 to date, as a direct result of our intervention on negotiations for terms, conditions, etc., production sharing contracts, E&P license renegotiated. I can report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, these are some of the projects. There are more that came on as a result of that. Osprey with EOG. We finalized the determination of the truck project with BHP, the Iguana project of De Novo, Angeline development with BP, Dolphin development with Shell, Ruby Delaware development with BHP. This particular one, it was the Prime Minister's intervention at BHP's head office in Australia that they took the decision to do it. That was a company that was considering pulling out of Trinidad. As a result of this government's intervention, we got Ruby Delaware, Barracuda with Shell. Again, our negotiation of terms and better prices of gas. Matapal with BP, Colibri with Shell, the Zandali development, which was the second one with De Novo, which is part of the Proman Group. Coho development, we got Coho and Cascadura over the line with Touchstone. Cassia Sea compression would not have happened, which is one of the most sophisticated investments and engineering feats in the whole BP operations globally. Cassia Sea took place in Trinidad and Tobago as a result of our meetings with BP in London. These are direct results of our meetings. The same thing with EOG. I will never forget when we were in Houston and we met with EOG and they felt assured by what we were doing, they immediately got on the phone and called Trinidad and said, proceed with the project. BP have done the same thing. Shell has done the same thing. I will tell the story about Woodside. I have met with Ms. Meg O'Neill 3 physical times, even though she's in Australia, whenever she comes to Western Hemisphere, to make sure that this country gets Calypso done. And the technocrats at Woodside will tell you they don't know what we discussed and how it is that Ms. O'Neill came out of that meeting so assured that she prioritized it. Because you see, when a company, Woodside acquired BHP, when a company does that, one of the first things they do is look at their books and their assets and decide where they're going to stay or not. We have ensured that they stayed in Trinidad, and we are working with them to develop Calypso. So we will have that deep water. Mango with BP. Last meeting in London with the Prime Minister, BP said go ahead with SIP. We have Mento with EOG. BP's infill drilling program, thankfully, has been meeting with a lot of success. Osprey with EOG. You have Ginger coming on with BHP. You have a lot of infill drilling going on. And there's a whole list of future production that will take place as a direct result of our intervention discussions and negotiations with the upstreamers. Manatee. To explain Manatee, Manatee is part of the Loran Manatee field, which is between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. 2.7 TCF in Trinidad's water and approximately 7.3 on Venezuela's side. There was a unitization agreement. When we saw what was taking place as a result of the US sanctions, we negotiated and got President Maduro to allow us to produce Manatee Field. So that is going to happen, and that provides a future for Trinidad and Tobago. And it is only natural that Loran will follow. And I can tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, in my recent discussions with the Venezuelans, and in particular President Maduro and Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, they are looking at Loran coming to Trinidad and Tobago. So I use this opportunity now, when I'm disappointed the member for Sipari isn't there, to ask, where is President Guaido now? But it is PNM government. It is the PNM government that stood firm on the principles of the UN Charter, non-intervention in another country's political landscape. We stood firm with our neighbors in Venezuela, and that is why there is this potential that is now in black and white, in ink. Calypso, we are negotiating Calypso. You saw in the last 10 days in the energy sector, unprecedented. One of the things was the signing of 3 deepwater wells with our largest multinationals, BP and Shell. We have had a successful onshore, nearshore bid round. 16 bids received for 8 blocks, all awarded. EOG brought in a rig from New Zealand for 12 months to have a drilling program of over 9 wells. People would not be doing this if they did not see the future of Trinidad and Tobago. And every single one of them will say it is because a sense of assurance that when they sit down and negotiate with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, there is credibility, there is no corruption, and there is competence on this side. We have launched just a few days ago the shallow water bid rounds, where 68 companies, 68 had expressed and gone into the data room, interest and gone into the data room. 28 of them nominated, meaning they identified blocks that they intend to bid for. So that is the future. That is what is going on. This is indisputable. This is irrefutable. These are facts. This is the proper management of an energy sector. Let's talk briefly, Madam Speaker, about Petrotrin. Because you see, there's a lot of false narrative taking place with respect to Petrotrin. In fact, just over the weekend, not surprisingly, a video starts to circulate with one of those persons who hold office for life in an entity that who knows what they do, based on a document talking about subventions from the Ministry of Finance. Completely out of context. First point, Petrotrin was not shut down. Petrotrin still exists today. Petrotrin is costing the people of Trinidad and Tobago today. And let the member for Point of Peer, who is one that likes to profess some knowledge, understand Petrotrin is costing the people of Trinidad and Tobago today in short-term loans taken out to purchase crude, $420 million US. That is the legacy of Petrotrin that continues to exist. But we restructured it. So there's TPHL, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, which is the holding company, which is the parent company of Petrotrin, Heritage, Guaracara, and Paria. Paria brings in fuel for Trinidad and Tobago and the region. Not one day
Honourable Member, your speaking time is now spent. You're entitled to 10 more minutes extended time to complete your contribution.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll use it.
You may proceed.
Petrotrin continues to cost us $420 million on short-term loans that when you roll it, because they can't pay it off, the interest rate continues to rise, and that money was utilized to buy crude. Let me briefly tell the people about the management of Petrotrin. In 2011, again, that period of 10 to 15, because they pretend that period didn't exist, but the people of Trinidad and Tobago remember it, and they decimated, they destroyed the energy sector. And that bothers, in particular, the member for Siparia who likes to repeat it because it is true. In 2011, Petrotrin made a net profit of $2.4 billion. In 2012, it dropped to $1 billion. So immediately you can see something wasn't going right to lose almost $1.5 billion of profit. 2013, the profit dropped to $15 million. 2013, Petrotrin's profit dropped to $15 million from $2.5 billion in 2011. That was management of Petrotrin. By 2014, we were now in a loss of $201 million. And that is for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. By 2015, the loss had turned to $1 billion. In 2016, almost $5 billion because US oil had dropped to US $25 a barrel. By 2018, the loss for the people of Trinidad and Tobago was $16 billion because the chickens had come home to roost. Because of the mismanagement, and it is irrefutable. Anyone can go and research this and see that in that period of 10 to 15, they drove Petrotrin into a loss-making entity that we still carry on the books today. We were faced with the auditors telling us that there was $4 billion in losses that they wanted to write off. Again, I was tasked and mandated, along with the then Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, to meet with the auditors of Petrotrin to understand this. And the auditors told us, you have to write off over $4 billion in carried forward tax losses. I said, but that would make the company insolvent. Why are you doing this now if these losses were being carried since 2013, 2014? And that is one of the things we had to deal with. We also had to deal with 2 bonds coming due, $850 million US and $750 million US. So almost 12 billion TT dollars coming due in a company now that had these losses and was insolvent. So let those who like to talk about Petrotrin deal with these facts and these issues, because that was the reality of Petrotrin. But I'm happy to report, and it was not an easy decision. We had to consider every single worker, but it had outlived its use. We were no longer producing. I showed how in the UNC period they dropped the production of oil by almost 40,000 barrels of oil a day. But they pretend that didn't happen. So if you have to import oil to put into a refinery, it makes no sense. If the uplifting cost, which is the cost of taking the oil out of the ground, was costing more than the sale price you could get of the oil, how does that make sense? So we took the difficult decision. The taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago paid the workers of Petrotrin, as hard as it was, $2.7 billion in cash to go home with, restructured it. And today, Heritage, which is the exploration and production company, as a result of the new management, as a result of new techniques, new tooling, etc., is declaring net profits in the billions. P&M style. Madam Speaker, Dragon. Let me say a few things on Dragon. Because I've heard persons say, oh, but you signed agreements already on Dragon, which again just confirmed to me, Madam Speaker, that they never knew and they still don't know how the energy sector works. Because it is a progression of agreements. to get to the PSC or the license or the ENP license. You have to take the steps and make sure you secure it in black and white as you go along. So the first agreement, and this is all P&M, you know, because the UNC did not have the foresight to pursue a cross-border. Laura and Manatee is one thing, because as in our borders, they didn't have the foresight to look for gas elsewhere, but that is the P&M government, and thank God we have been managing it since 2015. We went and we pursued it. In 2016, we signed the first set of agreements that said the teams will work together in pursuit of it. Otherwise, you have everybody pursuing it. Trinidad and Tobago is not the only place interested in Venezuela. I can tell the people of Trinidad now and Tobago, when I was in Venezuela a couple weeks ago, meeting at the PDVSA headquarters, as I walked out the boardroom in the middle of negotiations to strategize, there were literally a number of multinational companies there meeting with them. There are other countries in the world wanting to do business with Venezuela. But what we have done is manage the relationship to make sure we are the priority. So what was signed in 2016, we then negotiated a commercial term sheet, which was signed in 2018. So to have the member for Point appear and the former Minister of Energy and the leader of the opposition ask, well, why are you signing so many agreements? Because the US put sanctions. And don't forget, that is what stopped it. Otherwise, the Dragon gas would have been in Trinidad since 2020. The US put sanctions and stopped the project. And let us not forget, those on the other side wrote to the US government asking for the member for Diego Martin West, the Prime Minister, and for myself to be sanctioned by the United States. That is part of our history, because they were supporting President Guaido and asking why I let the Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, into the country. Thank God I did, because today we have a future. But the people of Trinidad and Tobago consider if it was those on the other side. Nowhere on the landscape now. So the agreement that was signed actually refers to our 2016 agreement. And the agreement that was signed was between myself and the Minister of the People's Power of Petroleum for the promotion of joint projects in the gas hydrocarbon sector. And I can report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago today, it is not only for Dragon. Also, as part of that agreement, and we cannot get into the terms of it, because as happens with all commercial agreements and energy sector agreements, there are terms of confidentiality. And let me explain to the people why, Madam Speaker. Because if Trinidad and Tobago is negotiating, and then you have the EU negotiating, and then you have other companies negotiating, Venezuela would not want each party to know the terms of the deal. That is how the energy sector works. But they wouldn't know, because they never negotiated a gas supply contract. They never negotiated anything with the upstream. They negotiated one contract that is still costing us billions of dollars. So Dragon is well on the way. And let me just tell the people as well, you can see the strategy of this government. Last year, I went to the United States 8 times, 7 to Washington, D.C., very quietly. I never made any announcements, and that led to only the second OFAC license ever granted for Venezuela production. The only other one is Chevron, that is a 3-month license. So when you hear the ignorance of, it's only 2 years, and let me tell you something more. When we signed that, there was silence, because it hadn't happened anywhere else. The next thing you know is, Maduro wouldn't do the deal with Trinidad and Tobago. So what happened 2 weeks ago? When he signed an agreement that is in black and white, that is not only for the pursuit of Dragon gas, that I can tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because I hear the next false argument right now that it is only for LNG. It is not only for LNG, because this government knows what it's doing. There is an allocation for domestic gas. And right now I can report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we've had a number of meetings and we are now negotiating the pricing. I'm being told that I have to hurry and wrap up. We have also signed an MOU with Suriname. We're pursuing regional opportunities as well. And we have had 2 technical meetings with them, again, quietly. That is how I operate. That is how we operate. And at the end, you see the results. Project Lara, the largest solar project In the CARICOM, we are also pursuing wind for the generation of electricity. We're pursuing more efficient power generation by combined cycle. We are building the first green hydrogen project. CCUS, the reduction of methanol and carbon, is taking place. So we are looking into the future. We are launching NGC Green. And finally, Madam Speaker, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the people of Port of Spain, as I started, to thank the people of Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West for the opportunity and to assure them that I will continue to work on their behalf and the people of Trinidad.
Member for Point of Vale.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning.